So here we are on the day of our 2023 Hyflex Collaborative Conference. We're welcoming everyone to the conference just by doing a little icebreaker, finding out where everyone is, and you're going to get a chance to answer 4 different questions. So if you go to menti.com, menti.com, and enter the code 1187-8080, it's always good to know who the audience is, right? It's good to know who you're speaking to, who you're engaging with, who's in the room. So here we can see that we've got a high faculty presence. Instructional design, definitely intricate in Hyflex. Administration, definitely we need supportive administration without a doubt. Students are so important. We definitely need students, and it's nice to have a student here. I think I know who the student is. Teachers, K through 12, it's summertime, so maybe that could be why we don't have any teachers, but teachers are so important in all of this in Hyflex, because without the teachers, without the instructors, without the professors, it doesn't happen, does it? So we need to make sure that we have that. And then within the other category, we know we've got some tech support. We've got, who else is in other? I know that we had one that was tech support and audiovisual. If anyone else was the other, if you want to chime in and tell us what other is. Professional development for lecturers. Excellent, excellent. And then experience with Hyflex is best described as know my way around, but plenty to learn is the predominant response. We're up to 9 super users, 8 minimal experience, and 6 with no experience. Everybody is welcome. Everybody is welcome to join in the conversation. This is a fun one too, the last non-academic book. I'll just kind of scroll through this. And Jerry, we'll be able to keep this going so people can continue to add and can look through. The Menti number doesn't show on the screen. Can you put it in the chat? Absolutely. So the code for menti.com, the code is 1187-8080. Was anybody else a user of Mentimeter or another cool tool? We've got about a minute left. Lead classroom technologist, excellent, excellent. Technology, so maybe that would be a good way to adapt that other is have a technology category, because that seems to be such an important piece to it. Technology, you're all the ones that make it work, make it come on, make it go. Thank you, Karina, for posting the sponsors. Please take a look at those as well. It's going to be a busy day. You're going to see a lot of us, and you're going to hear a lot of us.
Oh, you're disabled? Let me see if I can find you.
Okay. All right, I've got 10 a.m. Jerry, you want to take it from here?
I certainly will. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Hyflex Collaborative Conference. And thank you, Kathy, for spending the last half an hour with us and building a little community. We will have people coming and going all day. We have people from around the world joining us in this Hyflex Collaborative Conference. And please remember, this is being recorded and will be available 3 months after the conference. And so there will be people who will be joining us synchronously and people who will be looking at this conference asynchronously at another time. So before I turn it over to David Rhodes, who will introduce our keynote, and there's some important people here that we would like to share a little information and send some greetings. And one of those individuals is Dean Virginia Goatley from the University at Albany, who's going to send a warm welcome to everyone. And I'm going to turn it over to Virginia Goatley, Dean of the School of Education at the University at Albany. Good morning, Virginia.
Good morning, Jerry. You can hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay, terrific. I just wanted to start with a welcome. We're excited to have the first Hyflex Collaborative Conference. It's hosted by the Hyflex Collaborative and the Academy for the Advancement of Teaching, Leadership in Schools, also known as ATLAS, at UAlbany's School of Education. I am so pleased that you're joining us, and I want to give a special shout out and thanks to all the people who worked so hard to make this conference happen. I know there is a lot of collaboration going along the way. This event, we think at UAlbany, is an important occasion to recognize the ongoing nature of innovation and commitment to a variety of instructional models at the School of Education. We started as a normal school in 1844, and we just continue to develop and change as we think about what's needed for preparation of educators, leaders, policy makers, mental health practitioners. There's a whole range of community partners, faculty, staff, friends, our K-12 collaborators who could all benefit from this type of conference as we're all learning together and thinking about new ways for instruction. So the School of Education has been providing online programming for nearly 25 years. We're currently ranked number 4 in the nation for online graduate education programs in the U.S. News and World Report. I know I taught my first online class in 1999. I used WebCT 1.0. I don't know if any of you still remember that. But we've come a long way since then. We've looked at, different asynchronous, synchronous, hybrid models with the pro cons of each, depending on the context and the people involved. And I really see this as a next step in thinking through what we might all do and learn from each other. I know that in my conversation with researchers, with the New York State Education Department, people across the country through accreditation conversations and so forth, that flexible modes of instruction are a regular component of the discussion and looking at diverse uses of doing that. So for all of these reasons, it's timely to host a conference on the role of Hyflex instruction. Many thanks to ATLAS and Hyflex Collaborative for bringing us together to learn about and discuss these opportunities. And we are delighted you are joining us. So enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate you being here this morning and being a supporter of the Hyflex Collaborative. And I would like to take a moment to actually introduce our Hyflex Collaborative team. And so if you could unmute yourself and say hello, I'm going to start with the person I see on the top right-hand side of my screen, and that is Dr. Riley.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Gina Riley, CUNY Hunter College and the Hyflex Collaborative. So happy to see you all here.
David.
I'm David Rhodes. I am the Director of Teaching Excellence and Digital Pedagogy at Vanguard, also part of the team here for this conference.
Kathy.
Good morning. I am Kathy Littlefield with Pierce College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am a professor and faculty chair of the business division. It's great to be here.
Jeannie.
Hey, I'm Jean Samuel, and I'm here as an advisor from the HLC. Formerly, I was a dean of distance learning.
Brian.
Hello, Brian Beatty here. I'm a professor of education at San Francisco State University, and I'm kind of the lead coordinator of the Hyflex learning community, one of the contributors to the Hyflex Collaborative. Good to see everyone.
And the father of Hyflex, Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Vickers. I'm a lecturer too at the University at Albany in the Curriculum Development and Instructional Technology program.
Karina.
Hi, I'm Karina Baranski. I am part of the collaborative conference team, and I am also a CDIT alumni student or graduate. Nice to meet you.
Glory.
Hi, I'm Glory Hink. I am an instructional designer at the University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I am also an adjunct in the Ed Leadership Program there and Hyflex Collaborative Conference member. Thank you.
And again, and I'm Jerry Rivera Wilson. I'm with the University of Albany at the School of Education. I am the Director of Professional Development and Continuing Education and for the School of Education. I also would like to thank our sponsors who have made this conference possible. I need to also thank Tara Doty Blanche, who isn't with us right now since she is doing the help desk, and she has been instrumental in getting the Hoover system functioning. So I do want to give her, I want to acknowledge her and I thank her for her efforts. So with that, I'm going to turn over to a short video from one of our sponsors, actually our platinum sponsor, Logitech. And so I want you to sit back and enjoy this short presentation from Logitech. Oh, you did. Yeah. It's
Jerry, we're not hearing the video.
Some great activity happening on the administrative side of the house. We're using the Logitech whiteboard camera. That makes it really easy for the remote participants and the on-premise folks. It's cost effective. We can move quickly, easy to use. By putting Logitech system, you just flexible and awesome experience for our students so that they can be successful and that they can get to graduation because we've provided opportunities that meet their needs and meet them where they're at.
Hello and welcome to ISE.
Welcome back, everyone. And I understand that some of you were unable to hear the video portion of the presentation. So I did drop in the chat the YouTube link so that you can listen to it again. We will be featuring this again later in the day as well. So with that, I'd like to take this time to turn it over to David Rhodes, who is going to introduce our keynote speaker. David?
Perfect. Yes. Again, my name is David Rhodes, and I am the Director of Teaching Excellence and Digital Pedagogy at Vanguard University in Costa Mesa, California. It is my honor to be able to introduce Dr. Brian Beatty. So Dr. Brian Beatty is a professor of instructional design and technology in the Department of Equity, Leadership Studies, and Instructional Technologies at San Francisco State University. Previously, between 2012 and 2020, he was an Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs Operations at San Francisco State, overseeing the Academic Technology Unit and coordinating the use of technology in the academic programs across the university. It's at San Francisco State where Dr. Beatty pioneered the development and evaluation of the Hyflex course design model for blended learning environments, implementing a student-directed hybrid approach, or Hyflex, to begin support student learning. It is because of his pioneering work that we are all here today. I know he probably will be mad that I'm actually saying some of the stuff I'll be saying, but I know that he is the reason I'm here. So basically my introduction to Hyflex started with a Google search about 2014, 2015, a search that landed on his important work. And it's his work that helped me and kind of inspired me to design courses and programs that better meet the needs of my students and the students of the schools that I've worked with. I know that this work has impacted many of you in similar ways. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Brian Beatty as our keynote speaker. Brian.
All right, thank you, David. Thank you for everyone else who's been part of the collaboration that got us to this point through the Hyflex learning community and from the Hyflex collaborative overall. Thank you also to our sponsors, of course, and thank you for those of you participating live, taking time out of your day, evening, or night, or early morning to be here. And for those of you who are going to watch this as a recording, as you know, we're recording everything so that people can be part of this, whenever it's most convenient for them. It's interesting because, David, you mentioned a Google search that turned up our work on Hyflex. Well, I did that same Google search back in 2004, 2005, looking for someone who'd already done something like this because we had a need for it. And I couldn't find anything. And that's one of the reasons why we came up with a new term for what we were trying to do, because it didn't seem like anyone was talking about hybrid, a mix of online and face-to-face, and the flexibility to allow students to make that choice on a regular basis. There was multimodal instruction, of course, but no one was really doing that. The intentional design that I was looking for local students, as well as remote students, but even local students having that flexibility. All right, I'm gonna have to probably slow down my speaking because I'm at an extremely high altitude. And after a week here, I'm still not quite adjusted. So I'm gonna share a presentation with you. Hopefully that this will also be available afterwards as a file, because I am not going to be able to cover everything I'd love to say to you. And I'm going to try to save a few minutes for some live Q&A in our session here as well. There may be other opportunities, and there will be other opportunities through our discussion forums and things like that to continue with this. So let me know if you don't see this. All right, real briefly, I wanted to just, I included this slide, even though David read my formal bio, just to let you know, I've done a lot of different things along the path that got me to the point I am today. I started as an engineering graduate from Marquette, but then I went into the Navy and learned about, operational side of nuclear power, which required a lot of training, all the time training. Went into education then. Also was an e-learning developer, and then spent time as an administrator as well as a faculty member and a professor here. So the point is, I have kind of an engineering mindset to some of this, at least in my opinion. So I had a problem and I was looking for a solution. I couldn't find a solution. So I started looking at, well, what are the aspects I need in a solution? How can we kind of put that together with what we have today and then what we want to grow into? And so that's kind of where all this went. In 2019, I released the hybrid flexible course design book free online, give it away, OER, all that stuff. And it turned out that that was probably one of the best professional decisions I ever made, because we had the pandemic when everybody kind of needed to have solutions, not just for online, not just for the classroom, but for some sort of mix, and a mix that made sense, a mix by design. And so that's what Hyflex actually offers you. And I know that we have a few people who are relatively new to Hyflex. And so some of this background, and you can find available through recordings online and things like this. But just for a brief review, where have we been with Hyflex? What was our case for Hyflex? We needed the ability to have students who could join us online or face-to-face. We had enrollment kind of declines in the early 2000s in our graduate programs, and our department chair was under pressure from our dean to raise enrollments. And so our department chair suggested to the faculty in a meeting that we should just flip our program to a fully online program. It was being done in our field. Why shouldn't we do that? But the faculty weren't ready for it. Students weren't ready for it. And we did not want a fully online program at that time. And so I suggested maybe we come up with a compromise. And so that's what we did. We learned how to create a compromise, kind of a bridge between the classroom and the fully online space, because we didn't want to cross over that bridge yet. We didn't want to be a fully online program. We wanted to keep our face-to-face presence. And so we were looking for this ability to do both, right? And then as we decided that it makes sense to do both, well, why not give students the choice as to whether they'd be online or face-to-face, and not just at the beginning of a term as they register for classes? What about giving them the choice every week? Or for every course session in our class, in our sessions, it's usually every week. Is there some power in that? Is there some ability to serve students better? And if we can do that, how can we do it well, right? And so it's kind of gone on from there clearly. So we've got, real briefly, we were trying to solve this really wicked problem, and we still have this wicked problem. A wicked problem as in, it's really difficult to solve. There are no simple one-size-fits-all solutions to the challenge for high quality and equitable access to educational opportunities, to instructional environments, really, for all of those who need it and who want it, right? And then the other challenge here is we can't just stop what we're doing and plug in a new system. We have to get there from where we are. So it's a transition. You know, a lot of us have been in a transition phase, some of us for a long time. Sometimes the transition is very short. Sometimes it's very long. It's always complicated. It's always challenging, and it's always difficult. So this is part of the kind of solution space or the problem space that we have. We're trying to provide access. We don't want to give up high quality. We kind of assume we have high quality in the classroom. Part of our design efforts around Hyflex is kind of verifying and kind of making that classroom quality even better, often as we're creating more engagement strategies and things like that. We're looking for equitable solutions. And we're looking for solutions that students in every mode feel like they belong. They're included. They're in their minds, they should be the top priority of the faculty, or at least as high a priority as everyone else. We don't want first, second, and third class kind of modes, right? We can't just add on and off asynchronous mode for those students who can't possibly be here in person, or who don't want to spend the time coming to campus, right? And who feel that way. It has to be that I'm getting an online asynchronous mode because I'm choosing it. And the faculty supports me in that. The teacher supports me in that. The system supports me in that. When we look at the single mode solutions most of us have done, there are always access limitations on them, right? Sometimes there are quality limitations. There are certainly differences that we cannot change, right? But what we can do is provide opportunities for multiple ways of accessing information, accessing instruction, so that people can find the best fit for them in particular. So if I don't have access to the time the class meets, and I'm not going to be in person, and I'm not going to be there synchronously, I'm going to be there asynchronously. So I need a quality experience there. All right. If I'm not a good online asynchronous learner, and I know that, right, and I can come to campus, then I will probably come to campus. Or maybe I'll do it online synchronously, but I'm not going to choose that asynchronous online path. If that's my only path, all right, well, maybe I'll enroll in that class, but I might be one of those 30 or 40% of the students who tend not to finish asynchronous online courses in many situations. And of course, the classroom has never been a perfect fit for all of our students, has it? I mean, I've been a classroom teacher starting back in high school since, I don't know, 30, 35 years. I've always had some students who I thought, I don't know, this is just not a good fit for them, is it? Whether it's a social situation or you know, a learning situation, maybe they need more time than I can possibly give them in a group-based instructional environment. Maybe there's another solution for them. So we're trying to provide opportunities that provide the best place for every student, the best place in kind of as they choose, but also maybe as we help them choose good places for themselves. Hyflex just comes from hybrid and flexible, right? Hybrid, it's a mix of online and face-to-face. and students have a chance, and it's flexible for them. There's a single learning community. I use this diagram from EDUCAUSE all the time. A single learning community represented by the big circle in the back, but there's multiple ways of participating in it. We don't want 2 or 3 different classes kind of stuck together. We want a single class, a single course, and students are just participating in different ways through various modes, whichever modes are best for them. So that's basically where we've come from, kind of how we've gotten for today. And today, we are looking at still a challenging context for Hyflex. Even though we've got hundreds of schools, thousands of students, hundreds, if not thousands of faculty teaching this way, we still find the situation where we've got people who are all across this kind of diffusion of innovations, adoption curve. We've got the innovators who are really been trying it out on their own, seeing, well, maybe this will work for me. Let's just try it out, because they try out a lot of different things. We've got early adopters who are looking for solutions for their particular problems, maybe for a department or a program, or maybe an entire college or institution or school. We've got a lot of pragmatists, which are often faculty. We often fall into this role, where we tend to stick with the herd. If our colleagues are doing something new, we may try something new because the people we trust are doing it, and we're hearing their stories, and they're saying, hey, this is working for my students. And then we also have a lot of us, especially faculty, once again, on more of the conservative side of adopting and change. Wait a minute, I've been teaching this way for 10 years, and you're telling me it's not good enough now? Why do students have to have flexibility now? Never gave it to them before. Classes were almost always full. Of course they're learning, right? So we've got a lot of faculty who will listen only when it becomes more painful not to change. Some of our institutions have actually seen this. Our enrollments are declining in some places, and we find that using some sort of flexible approach would give students more access. We actually can recover some of those enrollments, and we're seeing some early success in different areas on that. And of course, we do have members of our community that are not likely to change, that are not like to ever to adopt. But these are they're stakeholders in our community, and so they're part of when we talk to faculty groups or even administrative groups. Sometimes they're representation there from our kind of our skeptical groups, and so we might use different language there. And they're probably only going to be convinced when they see really compelling evidence that this is working well in other places just like ours, or wait until they see evidence locally, or perhaps they retire. So the change environment is an important characteristic of the challenge we have now. The technology environment is also challenging for us because you can't do this. You can do this with a laptop and a group of students gathered around it if it's a small group. I've done that myself before, but only as a plan B or maybe a plan C when everything else wasn't working. The technology environment is important. And our sponsors are really good at showing us the kinds of technologies that they think would really help us and that a lot of us have been using. There's a couple articles just came out in EdTech magazine this last month. One of them highlighted the space I use at San Francisco State. And so you can go to this article. The link will be available in the slides, or you can just do a search for it. It shows the technologies that we use. It's not a perfect room, but it does a good job in allowing us to teach students in the classroom with visibility of those around of the students online synchronously. Allows us to capture what's going on going on in the classroom as it makes sense for our asynchronous students later. And there are a lot of different varieties around here. I would make some changes to the as in an ideal design, but I work with what I have. Right, our institution we probably have about 500 teaching spaces. We've equipped roughly probably between 50 and 100 over the last 2 years for Hyflex with a variety of types of technology. Very few of the rooms are equipped quite like this one, but that's an important part. If you don't have the technology to support the student learning and the faculty teaching or the teachers teaching in the classroom, it's going to be really challenging. And you might start with very limited technology, but over time, typically we grow a plan for, well, here's the baseline. We're not going to allow this teaching to happen unless we have this baseline technology. We have to provide this. But what we want to provide is maybe this level over here. And it may not be the $100,000 classroom or the $2 million classroom some institutions will put in. Maybe it's the $10,000 US dollar classroom that is kind of the standard for us, as long as we can see and hear people in different modes. So this remains a challenge, and there's a lot of things have gone on the last couple of years to make this better in most places, but it's still one of the challenges we have to address. Another challenge of our current situation is the administrative support. How do we prepare faculty to teach in the Hyflex format? What support do we give them for course development? Well, understanding, what is this we're talking about? What are the important characteristics? But how do we help you design and develop your courses? Do we have systems to do that already? How can they be adapted for Hyflex? Typically, if we have systems that are supporting faculty teaching online courses, especially for the first time, training, maybe certification, maybe instructional design support, that should be an easy transition over to Hyflex, relatively easy transition. But if we don't have that already, that might be something that would be more challenging for an institution. How about our registration systems? How long did it take us to figure out how to register online students and account for that accordingly? This was, of course, a couple of decades ago, but we're going through a lot of the same kind of growing challenges with Hyflex. So how do our registration systems allow students to find out what kind of courses are being offered, what the options are, what does flexibility mean to them, and how do we count that at our own system that I work in, the California State University system? We have several codes for codes for what I would call Hyflex. And I think the several codes are there because the system needs to count students as face-to-face, online synchronous, or online asynchronously for some of the reporting. So we need that kind of handle. So how do we solve that? Okay. How about student participation choices? Do we give all students equal choice, equal access to all the choices? Turns out that doesn't work well in some of our situations. If we've got students in certain categories, they may not be able to take all their courses in an online mode. So they may be restricted in the mode choices that they have. How do we take care of that? How about students making choices? We may have students who are really not well prepared for asynchronous online learning, who are making that choice because of other factors, sometimes just around personal convenience. Well, if we find that they're not learning well in that mode, what do we do about that? Do we let them continue in that mode? Or do we have some mechanism to restrict their flexibility based on their learning performance and also taking into consideration their access needs? Okay, so that's another one of the challenges that we're all kind of wrestling with, I would say. I don't think anyone has the best solution for all of us. For many of these challenges, the solutions that work best are contextual and they're local, right? So we learn from each other, we learn from what people are writing about and what our research is saying, but then we put into practice in a local environment where it always changes to meet our specific needs, which actually I think is is consistent with the whole philosophy of flexible learning in particular. So those are some of the current challenges that I see, at least. We have this continuing need for Hyflex design, right? Quality design. This is probably where I spend most of my time, is working with faculty and schools and helping them figure out, well, what does quality design look for us? And a lot of us are engaged in this. And so we have our common principles. You'll see these reflected in a lot of the presentations today. Much it's written about Hyflex talks about principles, and most of them have a variety of these, if not the same ones. But we talk about learner choice. Students have to have choice. If there's no choice, there's no flexibility. It's not flexible learning, at least not the way we define it. And it's certainly not Hyflex. Equivalent paths lead to equivalent learning. That's the goal, right? That's our principle. Doesn't mean equal experiences, right? You cannot provide an equal experience in each of the modes, but you should be able to provide equivalent learning so that the outcomes can be met. It might be very different. Synchronous participation online here is very different than synchronous participation in a conference room in person, or listening to recordings, after the fact, after the conference has actually happened. Can you learn about Hyflex? Can you develop a professional network? Can you find contacts like you would at a normal conference? Of course you can in each of these modes, but it's a different way of doing it. Okay. We also talk about reuse. We want to build things once and reuse it in all the modes. So many of us talk about design for if you're going to provide an asynchronous online experience as one of your modes, design for that, build for that, and then take what you've designed and built and then use it in the classroom and use it online synchronously if you're providing that mode. Right, that's what many of us have found to be a very efficient way. There's my engineering side of it, but also the ability to, when we reuse the things that we're doing in various modes, like if we're doing things in the classroom, I end up capturing that, usually recording in some way. Sometimes students are creating artifacts as they do activities, and then I provide that to the asynchronous online students too. They would never have that in an environment that was only asynchronous online, right? On the other side of that, the face-to-face students and the synchronous online students, they also get access to all the asynchronous materials. All of the interactions the asynchronous students do, they're all online, right? They're all in some sort of technology container. That becomes available for the synchronous students and the classroom students to learn from as well. Sometimes I require them to all to be participating in an asynchronous activity. Sometimes I don't, but it's still available to them. So it gives us the opportunity to create a richer learning environment that some of our students really take advantage of, and they do appreciate that. At least that's what they tell me in the surveys I do. Accessibility, of course, is another important principle. All of our materials, we're trying to make accessible by the book, right? By the rules and the guidelines, the legal requirements, but also providing access as much as we can to the experiences from each of the different modes for the students in the other modes when it makes sense. We can't provide the same experiences that we might have in the classroom, especially if we're using complex equipment or some experience where you really have to do it in person for it to mean anything. That may not be available to the asynchronous learners, but they would be doing something else, that helps them meet the same learning outcomes. Experiences aren't going to be exactly the same. They can't be. We shouldn't promise that, but we should be able to promise equivalent learning. That's the design challenge that we work in. Speaking of design challenges, a relatively simple process we've gone through is we start with the outcomes for the students. We make sure that we can promise them that they'll be able to meet the learning outcomes if they follow the path we're providing in whichever mode that they're choosing. Then we talk about instructional content. What do we need for each of the various modes we're offering? Assessing learning. How do we assess learning in the various modes? We want to make sure we have, robust assessment in each mode, and also hopefully valid assessment and assessment that's not going to be, clearly a different environment for asynchronous students compared to face-to-face students. By design, I think that we try for consistency, right? Because the environment of the classroom environment for certain kinds of assessments, let's say a high stakes exam that's proctored by the faculty or TAs, compared to an asynchronous test that maybe is not proctored, right? That may not have the same time boundaries around it, right? Clearly you get different results from your assessment with students, or you could expect that to probably be happening. So those are the things we have to think about when we're designing. And of course, a key to all of this is engaging students in the learning process, right? The engagement aspects of this are probably my current efforts are more around, okay, how do we really create these engaging environments in different modes without having completely different ways of engaging? So I'm looking more and more for consistent engagement and a single form of engagement for particular reasons and for particular functions that all of my students can participate in, or at least learn from in some way. These are the challenges. And then we try to map them onto the various modes. And this is the process that I try to help people work through. Okay, engaging learners, engaged learning is really, quite important for us. And so we want to make sure that we're able to do that well. A couple of thoughts on that. These are some principles from online learning, asynchronous learning that we try to talk about. And the reason why we focus on online learning literature for some of the engagement is because that's where most of us are probably more challenged than in the classroom. Many of our environments started out as face-to-face environments, and most of us who are teachers or faculty members are probably, pretty okay with the way we've been engaging students. But when we moved to online, just like we all saw during the pandemic, moving to synchronous only online or synchronous as a majority online, we found challenges. Students wouldn't engage. How do we do that? They won't just listen for 35 or 40 minutes. Where are they going? Their screens are black. They don't answer when I ask them. It's because they're not finding it engaging. You as the teacher, you as the faculty member might find it engaging because you're the one doing all the talking. You're the one who's driving the show, right? But when students don't have anything to do while they're just listening, well, why not just listen to a video? That's not how we want to do our educational environments at any level for the most part. There may be a situation where that's great. I mean, I used to be an e-learning developer. E-learning was a lot like that. But that's not education. At least in the way most of us would define it. So we're looking at students who are engaging with each other, students engaging with the faculty or the teacher, students are engaging with the content, all supporting the learning process. When we're doing this engagement in the learning experience, we're looking for the teacher presence. The teacher's going to be part of and facilitating these interactions for the most part. Cognitive presence would mean everything that we're doing around engagement. We're not doing it just to engage. Usually we're doing it to help them learn. And even when it seems like we're just engaging to engage, like an icebreaker event at the beginning of a class or beginning of a term, right? It's really there to help students learn who each other are, so they're more likely to talk to each other on a real basis during the course of the class. That would be around social presence. And so we take these principles around engagement and try to apply them when we're in the classroom. we probably know how to engage students well in the classroom. But now if we have synchronous students as well, I think we should try to treat them as if they were in the physical classroom, even though they're not. And that doesn't mean, I think it also means acknowledging that they're in a different space slightly. So it is all technology mediated for them, this engagement, which is going to be a little different. But we provide them opportunities to be part of the class. And I like to have, every 10 or 15 minutes when I'm teaching a regular course, something for the synchronous students to do, as well as the classroom students to do, that's explicit engagement. Maybe it's a Mentimeter application. Maybe it's other kind of polling. Maybe it's a short breakout. Could even be 2 or 3 minute breakout. Doesn't have to be 20 minutes long, right? So that it gets them engaged, pulls them in. Maybe it's responding to a question in the chat. It can be that simple. It all works well. And I think we have to be very explicit about this. And what happens when I do this is my classroom students actually end up being more engaged than they would have been before, because now we're doing explicit engagement rather than me just looking through eye contact to see, what their body position is and what's their facial expression, which is all very, very good, important feedback, but it can sometimes not really represent their level of engagement in what we're actually talking about in the class and what they're learning in the content. Right. So synchronous, those are some of the key engagement challenges that we're working with now, and you will be too as you roll out Hyflex, or if you are teaching Hyflex, you're probably working through these things as well. Asynchronous, the biggest challenge that I learned is that I have to plan for engagement asynchronously online. It doesn't just happen, right? I can have students doing a really interesting and creative online discussion. Maybe it's a debate about a topic, or maybe it's some other kind of, other than just, okay, here's a question, respond and reply to 3 or 4 other people. I do some of that, but I also try to look for creative ways of doing that. But no matter what format I choose, I have to be there to facilitate it. That doesn't mean I answer every question, doesn't mean I respond to every post, but several times a week, if it's a week-long assignment, I'm showing up to make sure people are getting replies, and to also maybe shift the conversation if it's not going in a good direction, or maybe someone is putting information that's not right and I can correct it, those kinds of things. I also learned that, especially for asynchronous students, you have to participate in order to show up in an asynchronous course. So you have to leave a trail. And so in my classes, I have the students doing 2 or 3 things asynchronously that week that have their name associated with it, so I can give them credit for participation. I've also realized that my synchronous students, I can't give them like a grade for attendance. I need to give them a grade for participation. So just showing up like with you logged into the Zoom screen, you've got your name on a black box there, not good enough. If we're doing interactions every 10 or 15 minutes, you need to be part of that, right? If you're not participating, then I'll let you know by private message or email. Look, you were logged in, but you really weren't there. So if you want participation credit and the grade for that part of the class this week, you need to do the asynchronous path, because then I will see your participation and you'll basically have a chance to do over. Because you weren't really there. And then the students in the classroom too, obviously you want to make sure that they are interacting as well. Okay, so flipped learning, another thing many of us are doing with Hyflex. I'm not going to talk a lot about flipped learning. You can explore that. There's a lot of experience and literature out there, but it seems to work pretty well to help students prepare for whatever mode they're participating in before they do that interaction participation, even your asynchronous students, to make sure they've actually gone through and done the preparation you've asked for. And so the preparation becomes part of the interaction, part of the participation. So that's an important part of it. Another thing that a lot of people are talking about is gamification, and we're using kind of like game-like elements. Some of this will appeal to you and your students. It might fit your content well, some of it may not, but it's another way to help generate more engaged learning when students will respond to this kind of, these kinds of incentives, building up points. Maybe there's a competitive element. I don't think I do any competitive elements in my classes, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't work. Challenging elements, I do give them challenges a lot. A lot of times I'll do in asynchronous sessions, put them into breakouts and give them like a 15-minute design challenge. Here's a situation, give us your best thinking about your design path for a solution to this. And, you've only got 15 minutes and there's 3 of you. Asynchronous learners would do the same thing. So there's that time constraint piece. Some of those are game-like elements. Giving students choice, even that can be a game-like element for many students, because now they get a choice in what they're looking at, right? What they're able to do. All right, when we talk about assessment, all right, I think the most important thing is to be consistent, right? And to create assessments that will work with all your modes. In my classes, I assess learning, at least the formal assessment of learning. All students do my assignments in the same way. They're doing papers, presentations. Sometimes I'll do a series of quizzes, like a weekly quiz, but we all do them online or out of the normal class. Does a couple of things, helps me reserve that in-class interaction time for stuff that may be more valuable, more of the engagement stuff, but it also makes it easier for students who are moving from mode to mode in various weeks. And so they know that even if I show up in person, like we're doing an exam this week or something like that, or a presentation, it's going to be a similar environment as if they were doing it as an asynchronous online student that week, right? If you're going to do online tests and quizzes, think about proctoring. We, at our institution, we decided not to use third-party proctoring software for our classes. We do it for some certification elements where it's really kind of required. But we tell faculty, if you want to proctor the online exam, then we want you to proctor it, not a third party, for a variety of reasons. But those are things that you have to be concerned about as far as implementation. Who's going to pay for it? How will it work? And I know a lot of institutions use these quite well. I think there's a role for it. It's just not something I use in my own assessment approaches. I went away from most of the tests in my classes to more, what we call authentic assessments. So students are working. I teach mostly grad students, professional students. So all the assessments that we're doing are designed to kind of reflect the professional network that they're working towards. But if you do need to have tests and assessments, that's, you've got professionals on your campus, hopefully, or in your system that can help you design that. My real pitch is try to keep them consistent across modes if you possibly can. Our online quality review, they give us good guidance from when we're doing this for online students, right? And so this is just a summary that show up in most of our rubrics for online quality. Take a look at that. Multiple assessments, ongoing formative assessments, an important thing. Ask students for feedback. I ask students every week for feedback in the course about how they're learning, what the process is, and other things that would make it better for them. So assessment's an important key for that. Real briefly, I'm just going to show you, I'm going to change my share here. And I'm going to show you one of the way I teach a course, the way to design a course. Once again, this is a seminar kind of course, 25 students or less typically. And this is the student view. And so when students come into the course, they see the same course, they're in the same LMS shell, whether they're in person or online asynchronously, kind of the two poles of Hyflex. And so it looks a lot like an online course. The nice thing is I find that this is better for the face-to-face students than any kind of course LMS site I would ever build to them before I started teaching Hyflex, because I figured, I can just talk about that in class. They don't need to see that online ahead of time. So they can look at all of this developed ahead of time. I think it helps them sometimes make decisions about whether they want to learn this particular content online asynchronously, more independently, or in person, synchronously, or in the classroom. If it looks really challenging to them, some of them might say, well, I think I need to be in a synchronous environment so I can get my questions answered. And if I'm going to be around campus, I'm going to be there on campus. One of the things I do in this class is I use Mentimeter a lot. Like I said, I use a shared Google document space too. So when we do breakout rooms, we do notes, and everyone shares those notes. And the asynchronous students, part of their assignment for that week is to contribute to those notes after they've listened to our recording, the recording of our debriefing, our face-to-face discussion on this, or breakout room discussion for this. So a shared Google Notes is a critical part. I use the Mentimeter activity. We use discussion forums every week. I like to try some variety in here. There's a lot of great creative ideas. And sometimes I'll ask students, especially if I get a sense like, they don't seem to be really engaging in the discussion so well, I'll ask them for ideas on what they might want to do to kind of talk about this. And I'm working with students who are, relatively mature, but I think that younger students could also come up with some good ideas on discussions that they would find interesting. And then there's a lot of additional resources for everyone else. But we just transition to Canvas as well. So my courses are relatively simple. I admit that. And I give them an overview, et cetera, just like you would in a regular online course. Now, one thing that's different and makes this different from just a fully asynchronous only course is I don't pre-record like a 15 or 20-minute video of me kind of explaining what we're doing this week and moving through it. It's not that I don't think that could be useful. But I try to leverage the synchronous session with students in person, students online, to kind of record that kind of language and that kind of information as one of the reasons why asynchronous students would want to watch that video, at least scan through the video of the class, and maybe even scanning through the transcript so they get the information that would be part of that would be part of that normally. And so that's what I choose to do. Now, if I know for some reason that sometimes I'll have a module in a class where I have to travel, or for some reason I know it's only going to be asynchronous this week. Well, then I go through and I make that little 15-minute recording because students like to hear that. That's really important. It's part of the teacher presence. It's part of my social presence with my students, and it can help give students, me explaining something that they see right in front of them. Step one, do this. Step two, do this. But them hearing me talk about it makes a big difference for some of them. They like that, especially students who tend to prefer that synchronous interaction, where it's a little bit more dialogue, a little bit more, personal in nature. You can explore more of that on your own if you would like, because this there's links here to a different course. And this was actually when I was teaching in Moodle last year. And I just created a PDF print this. These links should work for you. And when you get the slides, you should be able to take a look at that, as well as the course syllabus that goes along with that. Okay. Well, quality design and facilitation isn't enough all by itself. We should also be looking at evaluating impact. And so there are a lot of stories out there of what people have done. There are case reports in the Hybrid Flexible book. There's a couple of new books out there. This is one of them. There's another one that if you do some searching for Hyflex and OER and things like that, you might find it also around design. A little bit more detailed than the book I wrote. My book was more kind of high level, introducing the concept because it was still relatively new to most people who would come across it. But there's also a lot of people who've been writing about this for years in using different names for it. Sometimes Hyflex, sometimes BlendFlex. Even some of the people on this call I know are just in our Hyflex collaborative coordinating group use a different term for Hyflex in their situation. But I've tried to capture the literature I can find that's talking about hybrid and flexible and or Hyflex. And there's about 150 studies that I've gathered over the last couple of years that are in this bibliography at the Hyflex Learning Community website, right? There are also universities that are providing websites that are publicly accessible, explaining what they do for Hyflex, sometimes sharing stories, oftentimes sharing student stories. Here's what a difference it made for me. Student stories, just 30 seconds to maybe 90 seconds, can make an impact. And that's one of the things I like to make sure that I encourage people to share. Gather the stories from your students. Oh, and by the way, you might be able to gather some stories from your faculty. Make them available. Maybe it's just internal to your own institution. Hey, here's the math faculty talking about how they did this and why they did this and why they didn't do that. Or here's the science faculty, or here's the humanities faculty talking about this, from their own perspective. Those sharings of stories can be very powerful for you. Here's an example of, here's just a list. And once again, you'll be able to see this from, this document. You'll have the link in the slides. There's like 5 or 6 studies here in STEM. One of the earlier studies and one of the earlier people that we started talking to working on Hyflex, Jack Miller from Michigan and Ohio State, was doing it with a large undergraduate statistics course, almost the biggest opposite course of the style I teach. I teach in education and graduate, most of them are graduate students, et cetera. Undergraduates taking a required statistics course they may or may not really want to take, talked about the success that they were having at a very large university. And so there's lots of examples about that. Can you teach us in engineering? Of course you can. Can you teach it in a vocational and technical education course? Of course you can, but maybe not completely, right? So you might have this combined approach where you've got Hyflex for much of the course, and then some course has to be in person. That's usually what we do. In our own campus, we don't teach a lot of STEM courses Hyflex. We typically do a modified version where we have the lecture component available flexible, but the lab components available in person only. Now, looking ahead real quickly, and we'll get to some questions. We'll see. What about communicating to students? It's always been a challenge. Even my own students, they don't really know what Hyflex means until they come into the class the first time. I send them an email. It's in the syllabus. It's a class note. There's some information on the website about the various modes we offer. They kind of have to have this explained to this. Students don't engage in online activities, especially discussion. That's always been a challenge. The challenge is that you find in the challenges that you find in online learning, the challenges you find in classroom instruction, the challenges you find in synchronous instruction, most of those come right into Hyflex. And so this is one of our, challenges as a faculty member. Now you get you get all those challenges kind of brought into your course environment. And so finding ways to solve those is, for me, it's a continuing process. And, the solutions that worked with one class, sometimes they don't always work as well for the other class. So what you learn over time, you get this expertise, just like being a classroom teacher for a long time. You have kind of a toolbox of things you can use. Oh, they're not really responding to that kind of interaction. Let's try this one. Or, this discussion prompt, oh, last semester, that was really active and dynamic. Not so much this time. Let's try a different approach maybe for the next time. Those kinds of things. And so finding ways to kind of keep them engaged and active and moving is always going to be, for me, that's kind of like a moving target. Is student learning online weaker? Well, the measurements I've done with my own students, the major assignments, showing them, okay, these are directly connected learning outcomes. The class grades, I haven't seen any difference really between the various modes. A lot of the literature shows that student learning doesn't lessen when we look at those higher level metrics. When you dive into the specific details about, okay, this topic, we're talking about this particular, like a sub outcome, and the students in class, we did this kind of activity. The students online, we did this activity. That's the kind of research that might show some differences, just like it might show some differences between online and face-to-face instruction when it's a single kind of mode class. It's more difficult to do. In my classes, I think a lot of those differences tend to wash out, which means their grades and the major assessments tend to wash out the differences in the individual modes, because one, they have the option to be bouncing back and forth into the different modes, and 15 or 20% often do. As well as I'm not looking at that, I don't have a mechanism to measure that specific detail, right? I'm looking at the higher level measures, which is really what their takeaways from the course would be. We've always had challenges. When we've had technology challenges, obviously it's AV related. I mean, that's the whole thing, is how do you see and hear from the classroom out? How do you capture, how do you get, the classroom seeing video and listening to audio in, and then how do you capture that so people can share it? Those have always been our challenges, that we find our solutions they always come when we have our faculty teaching and our technology staff providing the technology, working together on solutions. When we've had our major problems is typically when the faculty say, we need this, throw it over the wall to the IT or the academic technology staff. They came up with a solution, not really talking to faculty, and put it into place. And then the faculty come in maybe at the start of the next term saying, I see what you did here. It's not working for us. We need this. And so that cycle, we did that for a couple of years till we finally got a team together to create a course or a classroom that would work for us. Let's see. Time to build, right? Always going to be a challenge. How do we provide faculty time to build, especially the first time through this? If you provide resources for first-time online instructors, you should provide resources for first-time faculty doing Hyflex. You might find some other ways to support them with training workshops or summer stipends or whatever it might be. But it takes time to build, right? And so that's something that has to be acknowledged. And then faculty have to become very familiar with the technology that you're giving them to use in the classroom. That has to be something that's easy for them to use. It's reliable, and if they need support, they can get it. There's my hand holding an old time phone. They can get it right away. Well, one last challenge here, and then we'll take we have 5 minutes left or so. We can do a little 4 minutes left. Okay, maybe we'll have a couple of seconds for Q&A. One of the things we find pre-pandemic, I had almost half my students in person when I would teach Hyflex. Post-pandemic, my particular set of students, very few of them have wanted to come back to the classroom. So my classes have shifted almost completely to online flexible, online asynchronous, online synchronous, and very few students who want to be participating in the classroom. So what I do now is every week, I try to find out if any students want to be in the classroom so that I can plan on being in the classroom and I can make sure we have that set up for them, or that we just do it as an online flexible class. The students that I teach really find that flexibility still quite valuable for them, but this is a shift. And so your particular situation probably won't be that much polar to online, but you will find probably more students are taking advantage of that because they've learned how to do that. They've learned what that flexibility means, and they're becoming maybe they get more opportunity. All right. So these are some of the questions, right, that you might think about. What's been the greatest challenge? And I ask these students, what's been the challenge? What's been the advantage of working in a Hyflex course? And what about your experience of learning quality or equity? And I captured a lot of their notes, actually, their notes, their videos here. And so you can listen to these videos. There's a YouTube playlist there that might be helpful for you. I'm not going to play any now. Don't have time for that. But I think that's about all I'll say. The slides will be available to you. I'm not exactly sure how we get them to you. I'm sure someone will tell us how. And that's it. Are there any? We probably have time for one or two questions. I'm not sure how we're facilitating this, but I can look at the chat at least.
There were a couple in the chat. One of them was having a problem with students being able to figure out how to stay on task, no matter how organized she was with her course.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. That's a challenge we have in pretty much every mode of every class we do now, right? It's not new to Hyflex. It can be a little bit exacerbated because students now who have only signed up for face-to-face might have the option for online, and it might be more confusing for them. What I do is I try to use the synchronous conversations that are recorded to kind of provide some more of that guidance, but students often need individual guidance. One of the things I've started doing is using a tool called Calendly to give students the opportunity to schedule a one-on-one Zoom meeting with me for 15 minutes to get that kind of stuff answered. And it would be like the office hour, but it's a flexible office hour. It can fit into any open time in my calendar. And that app allows us to do that. It gets it scheduled right to them. I find that I have 2 or 3 times as many students who are taking advantage of office hours now that I've made it easier for them to do it through a Zoom link. So it's synchronous, but it's kind of like any time in my calendar that's open, but also anywhere they happen to be. Giving them opportunity for one-on-one conferences. I know some faculty require one-to-one conferences, once, twice, maybe even 3 times during a semester. And that's an incredible tool to make sure students are getting questions answered and trying to keep them on track. Jean, do you see any other questions out there?
I did. I'm hunting for it. It had to do with annotations. What are your thoughts about using social annotation applications like Hypothesis or Perusal, or video engagement apps like GoReact and Nearpod?
Definitely. I think those are all great tools. I only use a couple of applications for 2 reasons. One, I want it to be simple for me, because I have to start with me, just like most of us, because if I can't manage the tool well, or I feel completely overwhelmed, it's going to reduce my motivation, right, as a teacher, and that's not a good thing. But then I also want it simpler for students. Now, Hypothesis I've thought about using, but one of the other challenges is that I want my university to support this. I don't want to continue to have to use just the free tools. I mean, that's a good place to start, but typically you don't want to stay there if you want to do this in a more integrated way. Social interaction can be a very powerful kind of tool to use, because you can capture those, you can share them, you can keep them private, you can do lots of different things, and you can use them from term to term as well. My timer went off. Are we at time?
You have 1 more minute.
Okay.
There was a question about how you made your schedule in Canvas.
How I made my schedule in Canvas? On that front page, I just added links to a Canvas page. I don't know if that's what you're talking about or not. But the one nice thing I found about moving into Canvas from Moodle is that the support available, it's okay on my campus. They're still learning how to do it, but the world of Canvas support is pretty incredible. I was actually getting support from Central Canvas support, thinking it was my local campus support, and it was like within minutes, or I was getting answers to questions that I used to take at least a day or 2 to get. So that the support tools available in that LMS system, your own LMS might have just as robust support, but I've been pretty impressed. And there's so many people using, that solution that everybody's encountered every problem I've ever come across in Canvas already, and they're often willing to share their solutions.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brian. No problem. I was going to say thank you, Brian and Jeannie. It is top of the hour, and we have 15 minutes or so until the concurrent sessions start at 11:15. You basically will get off this and then choose the sessions that you're going to be part of. So you have about 15 minutes up until that point.
All right. Thank you all for your active participation, and especially your chats and challenges and questions.
Well, thank you, Brian, for being the keynote. A wonderful presentation, a wonderful way to start the Hyflex Collaborative Conference. And we look forward to seeing everyone at 11. In the meantime, enjoy this short break.